Fierce Feminines. Firstly, Happy New Year. Welcome to season 2. And as you can see, we're doing a video version. So welcome, welcome, welcome. And also, as you can see, we've got a special guest with us. I did kind of allude to her joining at the end of season 1. And now we have her on here. So I am going to let her do an intro in a second. And I'm going to let her do the honors of introducing herself. But before we get into it, as always, I want us to do our emotional check-in. How is everyone doing? Especially the fact that it's like 2024. I can't believe we're already in 2024. Like, Lea, can you believe we're already in 2024?
No, I can't.
It's unbelievable, but I do want to say I hope you had a lovely holiday. And I imagine now is the time of the year where the resolutions come out. I know for me especially, my number one resolution, I did say this to Lea in one of our earlier conversations, is that my focus is on my relationship with money. And I imagine there will be lots of other people out there who their focus is on relationship with money as well. But before we get into all the exciting, juicy stuff, I do want to do it. So, Lea, something maybe you may have noticed is on the Fierce Feminine, I do the emotional check-in at the start of the episode. So I am going to ask you, can you identify your emotion in this moment?
I am feeling so excited and really grateful right now. I'm feeling a lot of just appreciation.
I like
to be here and to be with your audience and to be with you and really happy to be here.
Oh, I like that. From my perspective, how am I feeling? I'm feeling very excited as well. Like, honestly, my visual, I can see this like really excited version of me jumping up and down. And I'm like, calm down, compose yourself, especially because this is the first ever video I'm doing as well. But I'm so happy to have you here. And without further ado, like, let us know who you are.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again so much for having me. My name's Lea Durante. I am a family nurse practitioner that practiced in primary care medicine for over a decade. And I found my patients really weren't getting better. So it's interesting. We're here at the beginning of the new year and the New Year's resolution. And I found so many people really sincere, really motivated, really desiring change. Often that's in January, but again, in medicine, people that theme comes up a lot. And I found that people really weren't successful. You know, I mean, the research shows, unfortunately, our New Year's resolutions, about 90% of them fail. And most of them fail by the third week of January. And that can be really depressing, but hopefully in this conversation, we can chat through some of the science and what I've gotten interested in of how to actually have success with those New Year's resolutions. So for me, my work pivoted from the kind of traditional medical model into an integrative coach model because I really went searching for better ways and more effective ways for people to get the results that they wanted in their life. So whether that's around mental health or physical health or relationships or career, I just found there's a lot missing from kind of the traditional dialogue. And there's a lot of great research out there that can really help us achieve those things that we really want. They're sincere desires. Those New Year's resolutions are really speaking to something deep within us that wants to be actualized. And so that's my work now, is really kind of integrating body, mind, and spirit to help people identify those goals and kind of use some interesting new tools and techniques to get to that finish line.
I love that. So Lea, you would know that when I had an idea of creating an episode and inviting guests on, like the first thing that caught my eye from your message was about regulating the nervous system.
Yeah.
Which is something I have to say, and we were talking about it before we started recording this session, that even in the coaching space and the alternative medicine space, I have to say that it's like I've noticed the term, but I have to be honest, I never really paid attention to it. And then when you talked about it, I was like, interesting. Because I do have a question I was going to ask you. So what I was going to say is, like, I definitely feel we have a similar mission. But one thing I did notice is, so my emphasis, and that's because growing up, I understand there was a lot of emotional immaturity surrounding me, which means that I wasn't provided with the tools to regulate my emotions. So my emphasis and my focus, especially with my clients, has been on emotional regulation. And then to hear about nervous system regulation.
Oh, you're going to love this. Yeah.
Exactly. So please tell us more.
Yeah. So this is, and again, for people listening, like, if you've never heard of it either, like, that's okay. You're in the right place. Like, we haven't had a really robust conversation about this. And so again, I'm grateful that you're having this conversation and interested, but don't feel like you missed something if you're just hearing about it for the first time. But there's a scientist named Dr. Stephen Porges, and he was doing research actually back in the 1990s. So 30 plus years ago, which is wild. In the NICU, so with little babes that were, and actually I don't know if in England, is it the place where the little tiny babies, the premature babies are born?
Yeah, we call it the NICU as well. Yeah.
Okay. I know sometimes there's, I guess I should say that. I live in Idaho in America, in the United States. So he was doing research on these little tiny, very vulnerable babies. And what he noticed is the heart rate of the babies changed in response to their environment and their connection to their nurses and the people who were caring for them. And what he found is really, really fascinating by studying this. Many of us, I think probably most of us in school, learned about this autonomic nervous system, right? This fight or flight response. And right, if the saber-toothed tiger is chasing us, like, we're gonna run away or we're gonna punch it in the nose. And our body gets filled with adrenaline and cortisol and those kinds of things. And then the opposite of that is the parasympathetic side of things, which is the rest and digest and things are okay. It's where you can get really good sleep. It's where your body's repairing and rejuvenating, and those adrenaline and cortisol chemical messengers, the things that really cause a lot of inflammation in our body, are really mitigated and at rest. But what Dr. Porges found is, yes, there are these two circuits: sympathetic activation, mobilization, all of that energy, and parasympathetic, which is more of the rest and digest. But within the parasympathetic, there is the 10th cranial nerve, which is called the vagus nerve. And it actually, there's it's one circuit on the parasympathetic side, but it actually has two distinct pathways. So one pathway of the nerve leads us to that connected, safe, social place where energy is like robust but calm, and we feel confident and able to kind of like move through the world. We feel safe in our relationships. But the other path is to what we call dorsal shutdown. And so that's the freeze response. And so what he understood is our nervous system is actually almost like a ladder. So the bottom of the ladder being this dorsal shutdown space, that's our most primitive response. Like, if you're actually being attacked, you're like the turtle. You pull your arms in, head in, and just play dead and hide. And then up from that, then is sympathetic activation. Again, if we're threatened, then we're going to punch or run or all those kinds of things. Or, again, emotionally, how we might do that kind of jab, be defensive in our language, be really reactive in our behavior, because hopefully most of us aren't punching people in the nose. But that really,
I did think when you mentioned about punching the saber tooth, I was like, I want to be the one punching the saber tooth.
And then the top of that ladder is this place called the social engagement, is kind of this new understanding of how we actually truly became social creatures able to live in community, able to build this incredible society and world that we live in today, because our nervous systems were able to move from kind of that reptilian asocial place and interact and see other people and know that that person was safe, that I didn't have to defend myself or shut down. And so when so those are the three places of the nervous system. And what's so interesting with this, what I have found with my clients, with myself, is when we start to understand how this nervous system works. And again, none of these places are bad or wrong. All of these places are needed at different times in our life. But what you were alluding to kind of growing up is when we experience challenge or trauma or difficulty or stressors, our body remembers that. So it kind of like codes into our system. And so if 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road, we get into another situation that feels, and again, it doesn't have to look exactly like it looked when you were a kid. But if your nervous system kind of gets the flavor that this is a dangerous or hard or challenging place, then our nervous system can take us into one of those fight or flight places or those shutdown places. And it makes it really hard to stay engaged and connected and regulated, which is where the word comes from, and emotionally kind of robust and able to deal with our emotions and the situation at hand. So it's why it can be really helpful. And the great thing is we have emotions and reactions to everything. So whether that's money,
Yeah.
or weight loss, or dealing with a challenging boss, or burnout or stress, the nervous system can be this really beautiful pathway to understanding what's happening to ourselves. And what I love about it, then knowing how to shift out of it.
That's really interesting. So, do you know what? Like I said, I've come across the term, but I never really paid attention to it.
Yeah.
But it's so interesting because like I was saying to you earlier, my focus is on the emotional regulation. And I think a lot of the basis of the emotional regulation is the awareness and trying to trace back in your past what's causing what is now essentially an emotional trigger, which is i.e. what you're saying in these stressful situations, like what made me respond this way. But I like while you were talking, I was like, this is very complimentary actually, because yes, you have that emotional regulation, but now I'm like, okay, so there's probably there's been that missing piece where I'm like, well, I've never paid attention to my nervous system. Like I've studied my emotions and I've tried to understand why I react in a certain way to certain situations, but like I'm not paying attention to my nervous system.
I bet you actually are more intuitively connected to your nervous system than you know. So we can certainly map your nervous system together if we want to. And so I would kind of share that hope with everybody listening too. Like, just because we haven't heard the words or been given, again, the research is really cool and exciting, and they've validated it in a ton of things. And they did a ton of research using nervous system regulation for mental health during the pandemic and things like that. So there's a lot of really robust evidence behind it. But the cool part is we are living in our bodies, and our bodies have this wisdom to share with us right now. Again, whether you ever heard any of these terms or whatnot, there is an innate knowing within our body, and it has been guiding us our whole lives. And so it's more just like adding a new layer of language and a new skill set to exactly what you're saying, kind of get at, why did I react that way? Because that's typically what it comes from, that place of, I'm aware, and I've taken the step to kind of be somewhat more aware. I didn't like the tone of voice I used in that. I didn't like that we got in that fight and I slammed the door. I didn't like that I yelled at my kids when we were just trying to get out the door quickly this morning. I didn't like that I didn't speak up in the office when I had a great idea for what we should do with this project. And it's kind of like unteasing those reactions. And again, what's really cool, and we were chatting a little bit before, that we're such thinkers, like we're such cerebral people, and we get so stuck in our minds. But what's really interesting about this vagus nerve, so information on our nerves can either travel from the brain to the body or from the body to the brain. And we think we're all head first, right? We all think it's like the brain doing it all. And the reality is, with this nerve that's collecting information about, are you in shutdown? Are you in actually socially engaged and safe and at ease and joyful and abundant and vibrant? That's what the top of this nervous system feels like. Is 80% of that information and how your body is figuring it out comes from the body first. So 80% of the information travels from your body to your brain. Then our brain creates the story or the emotion. And then we have the reaction. So what's so cool is if we can feel what our body is physically going through, emotions just meaning the physical sensations that are happening in our body, then we can oftentimes, and the goal with this work is, let's say I'll take yelling at my kids, because that happens to be a example from my own life, to be honest and vulnerable with your audience. You kind of know when you get to that 10 out of 10 place and you've flown off the handle and you've said something you didn't want to, or a tone of voice that you didn't want to. And what this nervous system, kind of understanding your nervous system, mapping your nervous system, feeling your nervous system, is I can now start to feel when my nervous system, instead of getting to a 10 out of a 10 and then I'm reacting and kind of unconsciously and it's happening, I can feel when my nervous system is going to that place. Now when I'm like a 3 out of a 10 instead of a 10 out of a 10, and I have the opportunity to do something else, take a deep breath, use one of the many tools that we have. But the challenge is, if we can't catch the help with the nervous system is it kind of helps us understand when we're, 2 out of 10 or 3 out of 10 or 4 out of 10, or, oh my gosh, I'm getting to that place where I then react. I get to the automatic place where I'm not choosing it anymore. Of course, I don't want to raise my voice at my children, but it just happens automatically. Because again, this is the automatic nervous system. This is the one that's keeping our heart beating, that we don't have to think about breathing. It's digesting for us. All of this is unconscious reactivity within the body. But when you can feel your nervous system, now I have a little bit more choice. And what I like to say is, like, a little bit, you can create almost a pause and expand the pause so that you can step into the pause and then choose what you want to do differently.
I love that. So now I hear you when you say that there's probably been some awareness, but it's just adding the language to what we already do. Because so I don't know if you've come across acceptance and commitment therapy. But
I don't know that. No, I heard that in one of your episodes. I'm not familiar with that.
Exactly. So a lot of the emphasis and work I do with my clients is centered or inspired by acceptance and commitment therapy. But what I like, when I was listening to you speak, what I was reflecting on is, in acceptance and commitment therapy, essentially there's an element of what you described, but a lot of the emphasis is on dealing with fears, negative emotions, and insecurities. But I suppose, I think what I'm seeing is acceptance and commitment therapy in a way kind of works backwards, where you're like, okay, now I'm thinking about it, like, does that come into the point where it's the emotion has happened, right? That reactive emotion has happened. And I'm now thinking, so for example, I've got a big presentation to give at work and I'm really nervous about it. What acceptance and commitment actually teaches is that observation of, okay, what's going on in your body right now? Like,
Mm-hmm.
where are you feeling the fear? And once you have that observation, choose to let it speak to you, let the fear speak to you, accept it's happening. And then the added step is like, okay, make that commitment. Like, okay, I'm really scared in this moment, but I know I can commit action to speaking, right? I'm very good at speaking. I'm not good at speaking to a large crowd, but I know I can speak. So can I trust myself to speak? So that's pretty much what acceptance and commitment therapy is. But when I hear you speak, it's more about, so you spoke about, I suppose, the level. So I suppose you want to get yourself to a space where you start to observe your behavioral patterns. In the example you gave, yelling at your kids, and like almost then become a scientist of yourself.
Yes.
And in future situations,
Yes.
when you're looking at yourself and going, okay, Lea, I'm at a level 1 now. Okay, now I'm at level 2. How do I bring, is that pretty much?
Yeah. I love that you said that, because I often tell people to be a curious scientist, right? So no judgment, no shame, no guilt, just curiosity about who I am and what are my behaviors and how I am reacting. And then a really loving witness as well, right? That we're all working through this and figuring this out. So yeah, there's a lot of really interesting correlation there between looking at the emotion. And what I think might add to that is understanding the physiology of where that emotion comes from.
Exactly. When I was listening to you, I was thinking, I think that's the missing link that we don't have yet. That, like you said, understanding the physiology, because I'm just observing, going, okay, I can feel my throat tense. But
right.
Exactly. But like you're saying, that's a missing link where it's like, okay, now pay attention to the physiology as well.
Right. And the theory understands that because, again, 80% of that, and I didn't mention this before, 80% of that information is coming from the body, that the state of your nervous system always precedes the story. And the story you could think of as the emotion. Like the emotion is almost the ending point.
Exactly.
Like, I am fearful, okay, or I am nervous. What is my body experiencing right now? So it's coming from my body, and 80% of it's coming from my body. And then in my mind, there's now a story about being nervous and scared to step up and speak and give that presentation. And so I love that, like asking the fear to talk to you. That's beautiful, because it's,
honestly, I love it.
I love it. And from my perspective, that would be almost like, again, creating that little bit of space, that little bit of like disassociation from the experience. So you can be almost an observer or a witnesser of the experience and have a little bit more intentionality there. And yeah, so I can really see that. And then the kind of the nervous system piece would just be like, okay, and again, it is complete acceptance of our nervous system. Like, our nervous system is truly in our service for our protection and our survival. That is all it is seeking to do. It's not trying to sabotage you at work and derail you from your presentation. And so when we have language, then sometimes, rather than having to work just with the emotion, because I do both also, sometimes we work with the emotion, ask what the fear is saying, but sometimes you can shift your body so that you just don't have to deal with the emotion anymore. So both, I like both, but kind of giving multiple paths, like which way can be of service to you. So again, then you can take, because I love so much about what you talk about, then take big, bold action, take those steps that we need to act in this life. And it is scary to step into the unknown. It is uncomfortable at times. So how do we take that courageous action when we've got these feelings and these physiologic states underneath them? I mean, because your emotions really are a kind of a mix of these neurochemicals in our brain.
Well, yeah, and I'm pleased you said that, because I was also going to say I definitely see the added value, because you said like sometimes you can work with emotions, sometimes working with the body. Because when you said that, I was thinking also sometimes, and like at the start of the episode, I was like, can you identify the emotion? But something I noticed for so long in my life is that I knew I was moody, but I didn't actually know what I was feeling. So I think sometimes working with the emotions,
Me too.
exactly, you may
Me
not
too.
actually be able to identify the emotion, but if you're working with the body, at least I imagine your clients can describe to you like, okay, well, right now in this part of my body, this is what's happening, and in this part of my body. So I
Hmm.
definitely see the added value working with the physiology. A
Hmm.
hundred percent. And obviously, Leah, like when we spoke about this, I indulgently I was like, okay, can we like focus on my focus? Because
Yeah.
like I said, my for part of, I mean, I started working on this towards the end of 2023, but I know the emphasis on my in my personal growth journey at the moment is the financial side, my financial well-being. And I spoke about like talking about my relationship with money. But before we get on to that, I just wanted to ask you what sort of, I mean, I feel like you've kind of spoken on it, but the typical challenges that your clients present to you.
So I work with women who are struggling to really manage their stress, eliminate the burnout and the kind of the constant grinding and exhaustion that I find women as we wear all of our hats, professionally and personally and in our
Yeah.
relationships and those kinds of things. So really looking at what is the role of women right now and where are we emotionally, where's our mental health? Um, so a real big emphasis on that. And then, I would argue mental health is the primary starting place for all of us, no matter what work you're doing. And so some have diagnoses of anxiety or depression, others just feel that moodiness or things like that and want to have kind of more relief from those challenges. And then, so it's so interesting again that we're working here in January or chatting here in January, really this idea of we all know what we need to do kind of in relation to our health. Like it's not a huge mystery about, regular exercise and alcohol in moderation. And I think most of us know like we got to be conscientious of this social media stuff and maybe
Yeah.
not connected to our screens and get outside in nature and drink our water. That's not a mystery. For me, I really help to demystify that gap between knowing what we need to do and actually doing it. So that's so and for me that's mental health and mindset, but then also kind of those healthy habits that we know support our life so that our life feels like it's nourishing and strong, both mentally and physically.
So like I hear you like into the absolutely, because so I had someone that recently asked me, because I set up the podcast and then I was like, I made that bold step to step out of the corporate world and
Mm-hmm.
start my own business, and people were asking like, okay, what inspired you to do it? And I was like, to be honest, it was my well-being. Like it's
Yeah.
not just I'm like, oh, screw corporate world. As I started to understand like my well-being is like it's so valuable, and like you said, starting
Mm-hmm.
from the mental, because it's like, what's the point of achieving all these goals? What's the point of setting up this amazing life if you can't enjoy it? And
Yeah.
the first and best way to enjoy it is the prioritization of our
Mm-hmm.
well-being.
Yes. Yes. So
So,
that's
needless to
that's where
say, exactly, I'm very glad that we have people like you offering the type of service you do, because it's crucial. Like it's the whole goal of the Fierce Feminine Rising, like getting women to really focus and prioritize. Because I genuinely believe, like, I mean, I suppose in some sense with some of my episodes, I try and package it in terms of okay, this will help you achieve success. But ultimately, the priority is always well-being. And I do believe that, like you said, like, I'm not going to sit here and tell people you need to exercise, because we know we need to exercise. Like, we know we need to eat better. But like you said, it's that commitment. And a lot of us struggle. And it's not because we don't know how to do it. It's most likely, like you say as well, we're not equipped with the tools to, like you said, bridge that gap into the knowing what I'm supposed to do and that taking action to doing what I need to do.
I this brought up two things. First, right, and I think the model that we have all been given, particularly the New Year's resolution model, that
don't get me
if you're
started on
just
that.
committed enough, if you just have enough willpower, if you just kind of force and grin and bear it and do what you need to do, then you will achieve whatever it is. And I say that that model has made us, one, the model doesn't work. Again, 90% of New Year's resolutions fail. Again, they've studied cardiac patients after a significant coronary event. They know they need to stop smoking and stop drinking. With a doctor's recommendation, 90% of doctors' recommendations fail. Like, that model of force and commitment and, like, if I just push through and do what I'm supposed to do, doesn't work. And so my research has really looked at, okay, if that model is not working, what model works? And I find centering that idea of well-being, centering that idea of who am I being, what is my identity, who am I becoming, rather than really the outcome focus. Because if we're always focused on the outcome, like, then the goalpost always moves. First, you need this, you need this title in order to be happy and have well-being. And you need this relationship in order to be happy and have well-being. And you need this car in order to be happy and have well-being. And we continue to kind of look outside ourselves for that happiness and well-being. And if I just achieve this, if I just get this, whether that's lose 10 pounds, get the C-suite, have the marriage, have the 2 kids, right? Like, so many people kind of thinking, then I will be, and reorienting towards beginning in that place of well-being. And then you can build these tools and habits. And one of the ways that I do that is with the nervous system. But I loved that you brought up, and I love that your focus is financial right now, because I think we really need to be, that is a huge part of your overall well-being.
I agree.
We have to be talking about this, that how we live, how we earn money, how we feel secure with the resources that we have, what we can do with that money. All of those things are good things. And I do think that there's a fair amount of shame, particularly around women, of even talking about money or having conversations about what it means to have money. So I love that this is your focus for the year, and it is a big part of our overall kind of holistic wellness. You can't, it's a part of it. It's naive to say, and it's inaccurate to say, like, oh, I don't need money in order to,
I know. Well, this is the thing. And like, for years, when I thought about well-being, I'd only really think mental, emotional, physical. And a lot of times in the well-being industry, like, you get a lot of people, they talk about mind, body, and soul, which is important, right? And then it got to a stage where I started to focus more on spirituality. So I was like, okay, my well-being is mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual. And again, that would be my focus. But now I'm like, hang on a minute, there is financial, because like you said, and also stepping into the service industry, there is a lot of narrative, like you most likely know as well, with holistic medicine and holistic practitioners, where it's almost like you said, like, it feels so wrong. Like, it feels so wrong talking about money. It feels so wrong talking about your value when you're supposed to be helping the world. You're supposed to be like healing people, and you're like charging them money. And it's like, come on, like, how am I going to survive? How am I going to be a healthy human and be able to present myself in a whole way to you and give service to you if I'm not nourished, if I'm not looked after? And we all fully know that finance is important in looking after yourself.
Of course. Hugely important. It's also, Mother Teresa said it takes a checkbook to change the world. Like, this woman who worked with the poorest of the poor and gave her life to people who, had nothing and were dying, and then spent the latter part of her life fundraising around the world, because money, and we can get into this, and this is where it's really kind of interesting to look at what are the stories underneath, so our nervous system can kind of point us to, like, what are the stories. And so we can do this for you. But one of the probably most common stories around money is like, money is the root of all evil. And it's like, well, no, there's people who are stinking rich, who are awful beings and aren't doing anything good with that money. And there are people who have lots and lots of money and do incredible, wonderful things. Like, the money is not.
I'm laughing because, like, literally, I mean, I suppose I've been talking about money so much lately, but just yesterday I was having this conversation. I had a conversation with my partner, and I also had a conversation with my older sister. But I was like, oh God, like, when you said money is the root of all evil, like, I was having this conversation about how I grew up for years and years constantly hearing that and constantly believing that.
Right.
So, like, the fact that you're talking about us getting in touch with the story behind it, and the first line you mention is like, it's ingrained in my brain.
It's ingrained. It's ingrained. And then, as women, we're ingrained, like you were saying, we're to step into the service industry. Like, women are ingrained to be selfless. I mean, I was speaking with one woman who shared, who was sharing, like, about her mom, who would always take care of everyone else. And like, this idea that, like, a woman is supposed to set herself on fire to keep everybody else warm. Like that we're supposed to burn ourselves out, grind to the max so that everyone else is taken care of. And it's just an incorrect story. Like, we can all be well. We can all be vibrant and whole. And actually more generosity comes from us, and more service comes from us when we are abundant and well-resourced in all the ways, both at our nervous system level and of course, I mean, nobody's arguing for, and I think that's the thing, nobody's arguing for like a hoarding of money, but there's, you could have, it's good to have. It's good to have. So I think it'd be fun. Do you want to do your nervous system? I think it actually might really help identify some of those stories. And then, like, once you can see something, like exactly what you're saying, what you were mentioning about the fear earlier, like, once you can see it, then you can talk to it, then you can understand it, then you can shift it, then you can change it, then you can write a new story, which is the goal.